All right, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar in our Community Education Forum seasonal series. Thank you all for joining us on this beautiful Saturday afternoon where I am, and hopefully the weather is fantastic where you are. So I'm Ian Foss. I'm the National Director of Development with the Huntington Society of Canada. And just wanted to start off with a little welcome, and because it certainly has been a challenging couple of months. Not the least for the postponement of our national conference due to the COVID-19. We're very pleased instead to be able to offer 3 virtual community education forums over the next few months, of which this is the first one, so welcome. It's not the same as our biannual gathering, obviously, and seeing each other in person, but this allows HSC to still offer updates that would have been delivered at the conference. All of us at HSC are very hopeful for the future because of our busy researchers and their commitment to finding a therapy for HD. Our community is more than research, however, it's made up of volunteers with boundless enthusiasm, benevolent donors, and of course, individuals and families affected by HD who continue to give back in any way they can. First off, I would like to thank our sponsors. I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to Roche for their generous sponsorship of today's event. Their support makes webinars like this possible, and we're very appreciative of not only the support for today, but for other HSC events as well. So before we get started, I just want to do a few housekeeping items. And before I introduce our speaker, let's just go over some items that you need to know about participating in today's event. You've joined the presentation by listening through your computer speaker system by default. If you prefer to listen to audio over the telephone, just select the phone call button up in the right corner of the audio settings of your control panel, and the dial-in information will be displayed. You can submit text questions at any time. Just type them in the question box of your control panel, and we will address them later on during the presentation. While the seasonal series of the Community Education Forum fills the void we feel left by postponing our conference, I know that the information that's going to be shared will be of value to you. So let's bring on our speaker for today. I'd like to welcome Natalie Marnica. So just a little bit about Natalie. Natalie is a certified yoga therapist with over 1,000 hours of training and 10 years of experience teaching. Her journey with yoga started after a traumatic car accident that left her in chronic pain. Born in a family affected by HD, Natalie has spent many years caregiving for her mom and other family members. She's been a volunteer with HSC for over 5 years and currently sits as the president of the Toronto chapter, as well as serving as a youth mentor for HSC. In 2010, Natalie founded Sacred Mountain Yoga, which provides yoga therapy, chair yoga, and workshops around the GTA and online. As a person who has managed to reverse caregiver burnout, heal chronic pain and depression, she truly believes that even in dark times, there is still hope for a better future. Her experiences give her a unique approach, and she's very passionate about helping others. Today, Natalie will explore information and resources needed to reduce stress and anxiety, build resilience, and caregiver sustainability. I know that I'm eager to learn more, so without further ado, please welcome Natalie Marnica. Natalie?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ian, for that lovely introduction. Thank you, everybody, for being on this call. This has been an incredible journey with working with the Huntington Society of Canada. I first got to present this workshop in Kelowna a few years ago, and it was a big success. So I'm so happy that we're able to do this again. So as Ian had mentioned, I started my journey with yoga and meditation after a car accident. So about 10 years ago, I was involved in a car accident that left me in chronic pain. At the same time, my mom was diagnosed with Huntington's disease. And at the time of the accident and her diagnosis, the preceding years were very difficult because she was getting worse. I was taking over the mom or the role in my household. And I was also living in chronic neck and back pain with no resolve. So all the techniques and tools and information I'm going to share with you, I've accumulated over years of practice and study. these techniques in terms of our mind-body approaches to self-care, they work. I'm living proof of it. And as we go through the presentation, I'm hoping that you'll be hopeful and inspired to take some actions to help improve the quality of your life in real time. So why am I here? Huntington's disease has been in my family since I was growing up. If you look at the little image of the little girl with an old man, that's my grandfather. He was diagnosed when he was in his early 40s, and he lived to be actually 89. Like he was one for the books. But during the last 7 years of his life, when I was a teenager getting into my early 20s, I was helping to take care of him. I was supporting my aunt, and I was spending a lot of time in his long-term care home looking after him. Then when my mom got diagnosed, my grandfather had passed shortly after that. And then I realized that I would be doing the same thing with my mom, just in a more up and close variation versus being like an assistant to somebody caregiving. I would be the predominant person caring for my mom. It was not a graceful transition for me. I did not know how to do things or how to be. So I really learned by making a whole ton of mistakes. And I hope that as I reveal some of the things that I was doing that were not helpful to me or her, you can be able to prevent those things from happening in your life. It's really important to me to be able to share these tools and techniques, because I remember being so burnt out from caregiving and just feeling like the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I don't want to have other people experience that unnecessarily. If there's supports that we can put into place, then I'm hoping that my experiences will help lend that support. So caregiving, so what is it? So I decided to start this presentation with just a little bit of understanding for people that might not be familiar with more of the formal terms of caregiving. So family caregivers, let me just pop up these little, oops, hold on, technical glitches, 1, 2, 3. All right, there we go. So a caregiver is anyone that provides any type of physical or emotional care for an ill or disabled loved one at home. So it could be a lot of things. Loved ones in need of care could be suffering from physical, mental illness, disability, substance misuse, or other conditions. And we have informal types of caregivers like spouses, parents, sons and daughters, grandchild, neighbor, or we have formal. So professional caregivers are hired to provide care. So PSWs, nurses, people in the healthcare field. These caregivers can provide medical or non-medical care in the home or facilities, and most of the caregiving that happens in the HD community is informal. So it's family taking care of family, or friends and family taking care of the unit. There are various roles. So what we consider a primary caregiver is a person who takes the primary responsibility for someone who cannot fully care for themselves. So for my mom, I was primary caregiver. For my grandfather, towards the end, I was his secondary caregiver. So I was assisting my aunt. So I had a lot less responsibilities, but I was more so on the ground floor. Reasons people caregive. So for most people, this is about 57%, caregiving is a labor of love. The individual wants or chooses to care for their family member because they love them, and and they are able to do it, or they want to be able to do it. Now, for a substantive number of other people who are surveyed, about 40% in this sample, the role of caregiver was taken on because there was no one else who could do it. So that plays a role into how the effect of the tasks and the responsibilities you have has on you. So if you've taken up caregiving as something that you wanted to do, even if initially it was something that came, it's a lot less taxing as if you were someone who is kind of not really wanting to do it, but the only one to do it, because we'll get into that a little bit when we get into how the brain perceives reality and how all that starts to shape different layers. But it's really important to understand that not everybody is choosing to be a caregiver. It's not their thing that they wanted to do. In my case, I was one of my only siblings that was living at home with my mom when she started changing. So the responsibility kind of fell onto me. So that was a really hard thing to deal with, because I was in my early 20s and I really didn't even know how to take care of myself. So caregiving and HD. Huntington's disease is a family disease because it affects the entire family and not just the individual. HD patients are considered high risk and rely heavily on informal support systems to provide what they need. And they tend to experience more transitions in care because of the degenerative nature of the disease. Healthcare providers have put more responsibility and demands on families, including more complex care that needs to be provided over longer periods of time. And typically, family caregivers are adult children or spouses of the impaired individual, with 70% of these family caregivers being female. In the case of children, they also might be at risk. So a layer of stress that's added to some of the caregiving roles in HD is being at risk or having tested positive for the same disease. And I know that because that was very stressful watching my mom get sick when I was still at risk. I tested a few years ago and I tested negative. So it was a lot easier to handle, but it's a bit of a complicated issue. And some of you might be listening and feeling that complexity of the issue if you're still at risk and you're taking care of someone who's getting progressively worse. The good news is that you are not alone. So 8.1 million Canadians are providing care to a family member or friend. So these are stats from 2015 and 2013. More recently, I was looking up the caregiving stats for Canada. So about 1 in 4 Canadians are caregiving for a family or friend currently right now. So it seems like you're kind of a lonely island at times, but really there's so many more people that are in similar boats, maybe not with Huntington's disease, but around. So that's important in case you are feeling that little bit of isolation. Well, who's not feeling a little bit of isolation these days? But you are not alone in this. So let's talk about some of the negative effects of caregiving. I promise this gets more positive as we go forward. We're just going to get the kind of less good news out of the way. So negative effects of caregiving. Consequences of caregiving include negative emotions and perceptions toward the care receiver, as well as a strain in social relationships. Additionally, strained relationships can develop outside the immediate family. Caregiving also negatively impacts the health of the caregiver, leading to chronic stress, burnout, and eventually illness or early mortality. So there have been so many studies related to caregiver burnout and the effect on early mortality, and they're not the greatest statistics for caregivers. So when we talk about reducing the burden of stress and anxiety, it is really important that we start to understand the role of those everyday stresses and those hour-to-hour stresses on your nervous system and on your immune system. We're going to watch a video in a few minutes that's going to explain a little bit more of what happens. Other negative effects include disagreements between family members or lack of involvement or over-involvement. And those are hard to navigate. Those are personal things that happen between siblings a lot of the times. Research has also shown that caregivers report psychological and physical problems such as anxiety and depression, high blood pressure, or ulcers. Almost 20% of the HD caregivers suffer from a stress-related illness. And family caregivers are also likely less to practice preventative health actions and may be at increased risk for mortality, which is, early death. So I know it seems bleak, but there is hope, I promise. Just hang tight. So let's talk about caregiver burnout. What happens when we burn out? It basically is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion caused by chronic stress, maybe accompanied by a change in attitude from positive to negative. Like I had mentioned, there are people that are kind of thrown into the caregiving role. There's people that take it up, but imagine being thrown into the role, being in that state of exhaustion and having all these negative feelings for the person you are going to care for. That happened to me with my mom. Where I was doing the duties of a caregiver, but there was no care in the giving. It was like, put food here, do this there. It became very robotic. I think partially because it was easier for me to look at her as not my mom and kind of push out as many of the emotions I was feeling as possible so I could do the duties. But it becomes very sticky emotionally to kind of deal with this and realize how much those emotions and thoughts impact your health on a daily basis. So here are some signs of burnout. You can check off as many as these apply to you and kind of see where you are, where you're at. Anxiety, depression, or irritability, feeling tired and run down, difficulty sleeping, overreacting to minor nuisances, new or worsening health problems, trouble concentrating, increased restfulness, constantly exhausted, neglecting your own needs, little to no satisfaction in what you're doing, helplessness and or hopelessness, that feeling of not having any hope, impatience, and oh, sorry for the technical difficulties. There we go. Let me get to our last one. Yeah. So if you take a look at that list and you start to see how many of those little boxes are you checking off right now? Because those are signs that you should take pretty seriously because they could be related to different underlying issues. So we'll talk about stress. So stress is a word that gets thrown around a lot. You can think about stress as a state of disharmony, threat, real or perceived. So what does that mean? So we have stress if there's a perceived threat. Obviously, if there's a bear or something that's going to cause you harm that's in the room, you're going to feel a stress response in your body. But there's perceived stresses. So let's look at the dynamic of an HD family. A lot of people that are at risk for the disease have future stresses that haven't happened yet. They have things like anticipatory grief, anticipatory fears. They're constantly projecting a negative picture of a future, and that's impacting their ability to enjoy the present moment. You can think of stress also as an absence of something for survival. So we get very stressed if we don't have something, let's say like money or resources or food. It's a really big cause of stress. Threatened loss of something. So if somebody's livelihood is going to be lost or their roles, that can also contribute to how you're experiencing stress. In a medical or biological context, stress is a physical, mental, or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension. So stresses can be external from the environment. They can include psychological or social situations, or internal, illnesses, or from medical procedures. Stress can initiate the fight or flight response, a complex reaction of neurologic and endocrinologic, it's a tough one, endocrinologic system. So that's your endocrine system. So that's responsible for a lot of the hormones that are moving through your body. In the cases of chronic stress and traumatic events, the sympathetic division becomes chronically activated, leading to some major issues. So right now, Karina is going to walk you through opening up a link that she's sending to you all directly. So we're going to watch a 4.5-minute video on chronic stress and changes in your brain. Karina, do you want to pop on?
Sure. Thanks, Natalie. So I have pushed out a link to a YouTube video on stress. Go ahead and click that link. It should be in your questions box. You'll watch it on YouTube, and then once you're done, just click done in the questions box, and you may have to skip ads before the video starts.
Thank you, Karina. So take a moment and pop off there. I know it seems to be disjointed, but this is one of the best explanations that I've seen to date on the effect of chronic stress and the brain and why it's helpful to understand.
exercise and meditation, which involves breathing deeply and being aware.
Okay, Natalie, I think several attendees are typing done into the questions box.
Okay, great. So I'm back to unmuted. So thank you everybody for taking the time to watch that. Hopefully you've learned quite a few things. Most important takeaways from that are that chronic stress is very harmful for your entire nervous system and body and brain. It'll shrink your brain down in size. It'll heighten your amygdala, which is your fear center response, and it will lower your area of your hippocampus in your brain, which is responsible for your memory and emotional state. So we want to look at how, and the good news was, if you finish the video, is that we can reverse a lot of these issues with exercise and meditation, and we're going to get into that very shortly. But it's good to know what happens. So we have major contributors to caregiver stress. Some of them are lack of knowledge, loss of control, uncertainty, and no or limited resources. So we're going to hopefully fill in some of those gaps for you today. So we're going to fill in some of those lack of knowledge. We're going to give you some things to bring you back into some sense of control. I can't do much about the uncertainty piece, but we can do things about the resources. So what can we do? So it depends on where we are. So I would say, how full is your cup? So if you look at the image on the right, you'll see a glass that's almost to the rim full of water. So you can think about that somebody who has a really healthy self-care routine that's basically serving from a full cup. So there's plenty of water there. They can just keep kind of giving and they replenish themselves. Cup in the middle is halfway there. So maybe you're dumping out a little bit more than you're putting in. The last cup is like completely empty, you've been doing this for X amount of years, you don't have that many routines in to help yourself, and everything is going external. Now, that was me. I was that empty cup. I burnt myself out to the point where it took me almost a year to recuperate fully. I was treated for adrenal fatigue, and a lot of other like sleepless issues. When my life really started to change for the better is when I put my mom into full-time care. So I waited a little bit too long to put her into a long-term care home, I guess in retrospect, because I was already trying to serve from an empty cup, which was just like push my health into the ground. But we have some primary goals that we can think of when we think of self-care, especially for caregivers. The first one is that we're aiming to prevent or reverse the physiological effects of chronic stress. So all those effects that were on your mind and body and emotional systems, we're trying to either prevent them from going down the road of burnout. So if you are in that halfway variation or to full, this is where we can focus on prevention. If you were in the cup that was empty, then we are trying to reverse those negative effects of chronic stress that have already been burdening you. Okay, so that's important to realize where we are. And then the second goal is to prevent future problems wherever possible. If we know these are our roles for an extended period of time, then we want to look at ways of preventing unnecessary suffering. So how do we do this? We're going to get started today. So the first thing we're going to do is look at how could we accept where we are. So fully accept your role. If you were in the hesitant group of caregiving roles, how could you take that up like a warrior's challenge? How could you take it up in a way that you're really accepting that this is reality without wishing it was different? And then the second step would be to assess. So in terms of a caregiver health, assess where you are health-wise. Go have a physical done if you haven't already. Figure out when your last blood work was done, check your levels, check all of your benchmarks of your different nutrients and everything that you can to see where you're at. Because if you already have some deficiencies, then you might want to have a care team starting, whether that's a physician or a psychiatrist or nutritionist or dietitian, helping you get up to a baseline where your body's in a bit of a healthier state. The second thing I would say is embrace the challenges. You're trying to do this from a mentality of something you can do. So if you feel like the task is too big for you, then the challenge is going to always seem as a stress to you. Create systems and support networks. So one of the things that got me through the toughest times in caregiving and also in getting tested, and then rehabilitating from the burnout and the chronic pain that I was in, was my support systems. So I had support systems that I was building within the HSC with social workers and genetic test counselors and the people that are part of the North York General team. I had a personal team that was helping me of yoga teachers, my spiritual teachers, and my friends that were kind of helping me on a day-to-day basis. So wherever you have to find those supports, we'll go deeper into them in a moment. And then focusing on what you can control. So a lot of times we get bogged down on feeling that we're not in control because there's so many things in the external environment that we can't control. If we start to focus on things we can, like our breath and what we're doing with our body in terms of exercise or movement, or what we're not doing in terms of, you know, proper sleep, diet and nutrition, we can start to at least reduce the burden of stress physiologically, like in your own system. And then we'll go over how to do more for yourself. So I have some very tangible things that we're going to look through. So why would you need support? So these are really important stats. So there's a major difference between the quality of life from caregivers that feel supported and those that do not feel supported. So caregivers that feel supported have less symptoms of anger, irritability, depression, sadness, less loneliness, and isolation. That is incredible. That is one of the things that shocked me at first when I was doing all this research, where I was like, wow, like that just feeling supported will have this big of influence over your day-to-day life. So how do we create that network of support? So the HSC has family services programs. We have direct support, education, local community development. We have chapters. So like Ian had welcomed me before, I am the Toronto chapter president. So if you're in Toronto and you're watching this and you want to connect with us, feel free to do that. And get in touch with a great social work team. We have so many great people that work for the HSC. If you're not already in touch with them, you should be. These are free resources to you, and they're some of the best in the world, and they can do a lot. You just have to ask and kind of get that support. Other resources, you can go to Carers Canada, the Ontario Caregiver Coalition. They have a bunch of resources that are online, and the caregivernetwork.ca. So there's tons of things you can do in terms of other supports that are just intended for caregivers. But if you think about what could support look like for both, so people that are affected by HD and people that are caregivers. So caregivers, you can look at doctors, holistic health practitioners, social worker, massage therapists, close friends, support groups, local chapters and events. For people that are affected, in-home care, PSWs, if you are in an area of Ontario or area of Canada that has these availabilities to have PSWs come into the home and take at least some of the burden off, it's very important that you get in touch with those organizations. They can be very helpful. And yes, they do have downsides. You do have to vet some of the people coming in. I had at one point like a revolving door when my mom was at her worst still at home, where we had PSWs coming in every few hours, in and out, and some were great and some were not so great. And we just had to kind of deal with that. Respite care, so places that you can have an overnight stay, you can have your loved one stay if you need a vacation and you need to take a couple days off. Therapists and HD care teams, social workers, short-term care and long-term care homes. So these are great for short-term stays, and also to think of long-term care. What is the care plan moving forward for your loved one? And then day programs, outpatient activities. I know that my mom used to love day programs. When I would take her to the PACE, the drop-in center at PACE, and then she was also eligible at the time, even though she wasn't elderly. I got her into one of these support groups for elderly people, and she would spend the day and bake and watch people do stuff and just kind of have that. So there are different ways that you can have that. It really just depends on what's around you. So we're going to get into it now. So this is my specialty, yoga and meditation. When I was first dealing with the chronic pain, it was years. I would wake up in the morning and I wasn't able to turn my head. I wasn't able to move or lift my arms. I wasn't able to carry my own groceries. It took me a long time to rebuild my body. And then I had a bunch of fallbacks with stuff with my mom, dealing with HD. I had a bunch of things happen and then kind of going back. But there are some tried and trusted techniques in yoga and meditation that are so helpful for people in chronic pain, and they're so helpful for people with any sort of stress-related illness. And we'll look at why that is. So yoga, I know you might have a picture in the head of what yoga is. Some of you might have practiced. Yoga is recognized as a form of mind-body medicine that integrates an individual's physical, mental, and emotional aspects to improve their overall health, particularly in stress-related illnesses. It's an over 5,000-year-old tradition of holistic healing, is now regarded in the Western world as a form of complementary and alternative medicine. So that's so exciting. The practice of yoga produces a physiological state, so a state opposite to that of the fight and flight stress response. And with that interruption, a sense of balance and union between the mind and body can be achieved. So a lot of people have an image of yoga of being very, I'm gonna go this one, being very bendy. I was very inflexible. I was very stiff. Now people look at me and they're like, oh, well, you can do all this kind of stuff. That's not why I got into it. I just wanted to feel better, and I did. And then I became a yoga therapist. I've been training for this whole decade from my early 20s till now in different techniques. And what I can say is that yoga helps us to cure what need not be endured and to endure what cannot be cured. At the time I embarked on this, I guess, journey to my own healing, I didn't know I was going to test negative. So I was setting myself up that I had support to pretty much take care of myself, because I did not think that I was going to test negative for Huntington's disease. So I promised I wouldn't cry today, so I'm going to just shove it down. But yeah, so I knew that I needed something. I needed something for my brain, for my body, for my health, for my future, and something that I could offer other people in my family. So what makes mind-body approaches to self-care different than Western models of care? The first thing is that it doesn't separate an individual's mind from their body. So we understand the mind-body approach, that your mind is so connected to your body. We have between 40 and 70,000 thoughts in a day, and all those thoughts are impacting your nervous system, your stress response, and your immune system as they're going through. The second thing is that it doesn't separate the individual from their environment. So if you're in a household that's very not conducive to a healing environment, that is going to play into how you're feeling, how you're thinking, and how you're acting in the world. So we don't separate it. We look at people as wholes. We don't treat the illness, we treat the individual. We look at humans as multi-layered beings, and what happens on one layer affects the other. For instance, if somebody is depressed, that's going to have an impact on their bodies as well as it is on their mind and on their breath and on their quality of life. So it's not just isolated into their heads. What we offer. So this is really, really cool. So I have recently partnered with the HDYO, the Huntington's Disease Youth Organization. If you do not know what this organization is, it is a not-for-profit organization that is international and helps youth affected by HD and their families all across the world. We are offering live streaming online functional yoga and mobility and chair yoga and mobility classes for people that are pre-symptomatic or at risk for HD, people that are mildly symptomatic, and people that have mild to mid stages in chair yoga and mobility. So this is coming up in June. We also have a YouTube page. If you go to HGYO on YouTube, you're going to see a whole playlist of resources called Yoga for HD with this face. So I'm so proud of that. That's one of my favorite things. I've always wanted to do this. And we're exploring some of the tools of yoga in that. So quickly, we're going to learn about what are yoga postures, mindful breathing, meditation, and some of the things that we're using to help change our brains in a good way. So yoga postures, you might see them. These are these bendy things we do with our bodies, these different shapes that we make. This is integral. We're keeping our body functioning optimally. Every joint you have in the body has a range of motion. Every joint has a function. So when I call the yoga that I teach functional yoga and mobility, it's because I'm designing the practices to improve the function of every joint in your body, as well as the muscles that stabilize and stretch. So we're working on mobility and strength at one. It helps to train your mind-body connection. So like I had mentioned, we have between 40 and 70,000 thoughts. If all those thoughts are scattered of your worries, of your fears, of your past, of the future that hasn't happened yet, grief and feelings, joy, happiness, you're constantly being pulled. So that becomes very chaotic. Most people will experience that as anxiety. So when we're able to focus on our body and our breath at the same time, we're training that one-pointed focus. We're training that state of yoga so that we're able to access that more calm, clear thinking, collected, and focus our minds. Our breathing, we have pranayama or regulated breathing. This is the way that we use to help our nervous system react better to the environment. So the coolest thing about working with different breathing techniques in yoga is that it literally helps to take you from your stress, your fight and flight response, your sympathetic stress, and it switches you to your parasympathetic, your rest and digest, where all your organs, all the body functions are starting to heal themselves. And that is because we have this long nerve in the body called your vagus nerve. And when we do things like deep breathing and chanting, making noises and sounds with our throat, we stimulate that nerve, and it literally has these attachments, these fibers around all of your organs, and they help you to switch over. So in real time, 6 to 12 breaths, you can go from a stress state to a rest and digest state just by breathing consciously. And we're going to go through that in a moment. Chanting is wonderful as well. We incorporate that in some of the movement. If you check out that HDYO YouTube playlist, there's a lot of chanting that's involved in the movement. We use it to focus as well as train the muscles in the throats, particularly for people who do have HD symptoms. We are trying to keep your throat muscles as strong and able to swallow as long as possible. I know one of the most struggles, the biggest struggles I've had recently with my mom is that she no longer can vocalize, and it's very hard to advocate for her, to help her, because the swallowing is an issue and making sound. Depression and your brain. So I included a slide very quickly so that you could see that if you are already depressed, let's say you've been dealing with depression for 6 months or more, you might have physical changes in your brain. So I look at it as somewhat like a brain injury. If you look at the prefrontal cortex in the healthy brain and the chronically depressed brain, this is also similar to chronic stress. You have decreased activity here, and this is where all your positive emotions, your decision-making skills are sitting. So that's very important that we know that this part of the brain actually changes on a structural level and also can be regrown. So this is one of the coolest things, is this is your brain on yoga. So if you look at that green part of your brain, it's right in the front. This is the guy we're talking about. Through regular practice of meditation and yoga, you can increase gray matter here. You can grow back your brain in about 8 weeks. And it'll help things like creativity, happiness, concentration. Your amygdala, so if you had watched the video, which I hope you did, the part of your brain that's responsible for your fear, that kind of expands as you're chronically stressed. It gets more sensitive to stress. That amygdala dampens over time with regular meditation and movement and guided movement and yoga. It calms that down, so you're less likely to have reactions for little things. So these are brilliant things. Like, we now know we can change our physical brains by concentrating on our breath and movement. If that doesn't make you excited, I don't know what does. And then our hippocampus. So this is where your memory, your learning is. When that, through chronic stress or chronic depression or chronic pain, in my case, when that part starts to decrease in size, so you have less ability for memory and learning, we can grow that part back, similar to your prefrontal cortex, and you're actually able to memorize and learn more. So these are really great things. There's so many more things, but in the interest of time, I need to skip through. Exercise in the brain. So what kind of exercises have the most benefits on brain health? So many. So yoga, fantastic. If you look at the first little under exercise in brain, it'll show you all the things that help train from different things. So high intensity of interval training is really great for regulating your appetite, cravings, addictions. It's also great to increase something in your brain called BDNF. So BDNF is a super important chemical that gets released during certain exercises. This BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, perfect, thank you. It starts to increase the connection between your neurons. It helps your brain talk to itself better. It's able to activate certain genes in a positive way. If you look at the little black box in the corner, and the high intensity interval training has also been used to help people rehabilitate from stroke and Parkinson's disease and ADHD. Meditation. People know they should do it. They know there's so many apps that allow you to meditate, but why or what does it mean to meditate? If I can distill it down to this, the process of meditation is becoming familiar with. We're becoming familiar with the constant thoughts and activity that's going on automatically. So that's your autopilot. When you stop for a moment and you start to feel those things, it gives you insight. It gives you a heightened sense of awareness and focus and attention. And for some reason, when we do that, our brains get very happy. If you look at the brains before and after meditation, you're going to see the both brain hemispheres, your left and your right side, start to act more cohesively after 15 to 25 minutes of meditation. You can do that standing, sitting, walking, lying down. We're going to go through extra techniques. So without further ado, we're going to do a small practice together. So it's easy for me to tell you why this works, but I'm going to take the next 6 minutes and show you how it works so that you have an idea of what we're doing. So I want you to sit up in your chair, whatever you're sitting in a way that you allow the top of your head to reach up towards the ceiling, and you allow your arms to relax down. And you can take a couple moments. So if you've been on the computer for a while today, roll your shoulders up, back, and down a few times, and just take the strain out of your shoulders, neck, and your head. And if you've not done yoga or meditation before, the good news is if you can breathe consciously, you can do yoga. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to teach you 2 techniques that you can do anytime that you need to. One is called diaphragmatic breathing. We're going to learn to breathe and stimulate our diaphragm. This is what's going to help stimulate that vagus nerve and let your body calm down. And then we're going to do a focused attention meditation where we're going to focus on our breath as it comes in and out of the body. So if you can, allow your eyes to close. There won't be anything to see. And take a moment just to adjust. You ideally want your hips above your knees. So if you're sitting upright on a chair, that's great. If you're sitting on the ground, maybe stick a cushion underneath your tailbone or underneath your sit bones. And then let your eyes relax and just start to tune into how your breath is moving. So the first piece is just becoming aware. How does my breath move in? And how does my breath move out of my body? And you don't have to control it, just feel. Breath comes in, breath comes out. And as we start to move into this practice, I want you to take a moment and just temporarily disconnect from all the outside activities of your day. And then I want you to make your exhale a little bit longer. And as you're exhaling, feel like your lower belly was pulling gently towards your spine. You're going to feel a little bit of a light contraction of the lower abdomen, in and up. And then inhale, allow the breath to happen. And then exhale slowly. Let all the air come out. Relax your neck, your head, your shoulders. Again, inhale. And then exhale, slow and steady, let your breath out. And now you can place one hand above your navel. It can be a couple inches above the navel where you can start to feel where your ribs start to meet at the front, we're going to look for our diaphragm, hand on top. If that's difficult for you, you can always try putting your hands on the bottom of your ribs so that you're feeling that expansion. And I want you to now, as you're inhaling, can you breathe into the area where your hand is? Hold it for a few seconds, and then as slow as you can, breathe it out. Good. Again, inhale. That's it. Allow the upper abdomen to slightly expand, and then exhale, draw your lower belly in. Okay, we're going to do 8 more breaths like that. Breathe in through your nose, slow and steady. Hold your breath for a few seconds, and then exhale completely. Relax your arms, your legs, your neck, and your head. Very good. Again, inhale. Start to feel that top hand or the side ribs expanding, and then exhale slowly. All the breath out. Again, inhale. And if you'd like to incorporate some sound on the exhale, make a little buzzing sound like a bumblebee in the back of your throat. Very good. Inhale through your nose. Exhale with or without your sound. I encourage the sound. All the breath out. Almost there. Inhale. Good. And then exhale. Couple more. Breathe in. Make the sound slow and steady. Exhale. Few more. In. And then out. Let's try one more. In. That's it. Notice your breath might be getting a little deeper. That's fantastic. Exhale. Now continue to breathe. And I want you to let your mind completely focus on how your breath comes in and how it moves out of your body. Where does it enter from? Is it coming in through one or both nostrils? Can you become aware of just the rhythm of your breath? Notice the sounds that you're picking up in the environment, the thoughts that might be entering into your mind. Allow them to pass by and redirect your attention onto your breath. Starting to focus your attention just on one point of practice. Today it's our breathing, particularly the area where your breath enters and where it exits your body. And just take the next minute to breathe here in your focused attention meditation. Can you keep coming back to your breath anytime the mind wanders? Very good. And then slowly draw the palms together into the center of your chest. As you exhale, rub your hands a moment. Okay, so build some warmth in your hands. Once they feel nice and toasty, cup over your eyes. And then allow your eyes to open up inside the palms. And then very gently, just let the hands come back and then come back to your screen for a moment. So if you can, if you have access, just type in the chat right now one word of how you're feeling after those practices. So getting started, so the techniques we used were these three here. You have should have gotten this when you entered the meeting. Annie has uploaded. If you haven't, they could be sent out after. This is the three techniques we've covered with instructions, so you don't have to remember everything we've done. This is just to get you started. We're going to touch a little bit quickly on healing guilt and toxic emotions. So a lot of this times, like, we're fumbling our way through this. If we're not professionals, including myself, I was very young. I had a lot of other issues with chronic pain and depression. I was a very angry and agitated person. There was a lot of guilt that I held over sometimes the way I would speak to my mom. It was very angry. It was very rude and cold. So some of the ways that I've used to deal with some of these more toxic emotions are gratitude. So having a gratitude journal, prayers, meditating on gratitude. It helps to improve sleep, decrease pain levels. It's overall very good for your brain. It reduces anxiety and depression and stress. Also, self-forgiveness practices. There's some things that you just have to say you're sorry for, even not directly to the person. I mean, I have at this point apologized to my mom several times, but saying things like, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you, over and over in a meditation to yourself will let you neutralize some of the emotions of pain or shame or guilt that might be plaguing you. I know that I had a lot of it, and I know that I'm still processing that. One of the questions I often get asked is, well, Natalie, I don't have any time. How do I fit this in? So I schedule it. If you don't have, you will never have time for anything unless you schedule it. This also comes into the assessment process where you're looking at assessing where your time is. So sometimes we don't have an hour. Sometimes our lives are very busy, but do you have 5 to 10 minutes in the morning just before you get out of bed? Do you have a few minutes when you're brushing your teeth or making a pot of coffee to do your breathing or your meditation? When you start to make that a priority and do a check-in, things happen a lot better. So these are tools that you're also going to have access to. This also includes your gratitude and your water intake. This one I love to do. I love when people are learning how to implement like meditation and breath. I just tell them, set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes, choose the day of the week, write it down, and then this is what you can do. You really want to plan and incorporate it. If I explain to you what my practice looks like, it's like brushing my teeth. I wake up, I take care of myself in the bathroom, and I go right onto my mat. And that works for me because I've had to do a lot of things physically, mentally, and with breathing to help my body come out of chronic pain. And I'm very pleased to share with you that for the last 3 years, I have been not only out of chronic pain, but my body has developed strength and vitality and resistance to stress in a way that I never thought was possible. And then doing things that bring you joy, so key. Like when you're a caregiver and you're dealing with so many things, how many times did you just do something that was fun? Do you remember what fun is? These are all things that incorporate into what you can do, and then finding why you want to do it. So why you take care of yourself. Sometimes we need to have something that's bigger than us. And for me, that's my family. I want to be around a long time and healthy to help take care of everybody. We still have several people that are at risk, several people that are in mid to late stages, and there's a lot of work that I need to do for them. Other ways to optimize your health, a walk. Walking is so good for your brain. It's like tremendous for your brain. Walking, trying to hack your sleep, meditation, weight training, having proper nutrition and meaningful relationships, so many ways. And I just thank you all for being here. And we have a few minutes. Hopefully we can get to some Q&A. And I really just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for being here and for taking an interest in your own health. And if you do need any help or support, you're welcome to contact me anytime. And I'll put my info in the chat box afterwards. Or you can write it down, info@smyoga.ca. So thank you. Ian, do we have any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Natalie. What a detailed and extremely insightful presentation. I know I was keeping notes, so excellent job. So we're going to take a few questions now for Natalie, and we've had a lot of really good questions, and we are a bit over time. So what we think we're going to do in this case is kind of prioritize a couple questions, and then what we will do is we will take those questions and allow Natalie to answer them, and we will post them on HFC's website, Facebook page. Is that okay?
That works.
All right.
Perfect.
Again, so a couple questions here for you, Natalie. I'll start with, so I always say I'll make time for myself, but it never happens. Do you have any tips to help me actually make it happen this time?
Yes, utilize a scheduler. So carve time out. If you want the time, you have to carve it in. So I would say use some sort of scheduler, and also assess how your time is being used now. So sometimes, like you, at one point, I was so busy, I always made time for my own health. It's because I had chronic pain. If you woke up every day and everything in your body hurt, you might prioritize it. So that was kind of my blessing in disguise. But what I would say is find the things that you can stack on. So if you need to do 12 or 13 breaths or 4 or 5 minutes of meditation, could you do it when the coffee's brewing? Could you do it after you're brushing your teeth? Could you stack it on to a habit that already exists, something you already do? Because that's one of the things that you can start to implement new things, and start small. If you don't have any self-care practices or very little, start with 1 or 2 things max that are small, and do them consistently over a longer period of time, because you're trying to ingrain a new habit. Is that helpful, Ian? Does that answer the question?
Great. Thanks very much, Natalie. Here's a good one. So I think yoga would really help my dad, but he says it's for the girls. How can I get him to try it?
Okay, so tell your dad. So if anybody has these men in their lives, you could Google DDPY yoga, Diamond Dallas Page yoga. He's a very burly, big wrestler from the 90s and 2000s. He's made his own yoga. And I like to show other men videos of men doing yoga, which is huge. Another quick fact for people that don't know is that yoga was never taught to women initially. So we kind of just got into the yoga scene in probably the 1950s, which is very soon. So yoga was predominantly taught by men, and really in India, that's what it was like. And then it started to evolve, and now a lot of women teach. One thing I do want to mention is we talk about yoga as this big umbrella term, and I want you to know that there's lots of variations. So not all yoga is created equally. Yoga therapy, which is what I do, is a one-on-one practice. As a yoga therapist, I also can do small groups. But when you're thinking about yoga instructor or general classes, those are meant for generally healthy people, and they don't consider so many different factors. So when you're going to approach a yoga practice, if you're in the HD community, start with the Yoga for HD playlist, or connect with the HDYO so you can get into those live sessions, because those are led by me, and I'm tailoring them for the people that are in those sessions. Or see a yoga therapist, or see somebody one-on-one, or start in a group environment that the person can kind of get to know you. So you don't want to come into something that's going to be either injurious, or something like a really hot place that might not be good for different health conditions you already have. So do some research, and always, if it's HD related, just come connect to us.
Great. Thanks, Natalie. There's a lot of really great questions. I'm going to pick one more. And this one is important. I think we all could have some tips. It's regarding sleep. So we need to sleep longer. My brain wakes me up early in the morning. How do I calm my brain before I go to bed and when I wake up in the morning?
Okay, so sleep is so crucial. So one of the things we talked about was breathing. So not all breathing is also created equal. If you are trying to fall asleep, the best method of breath is to have a long exhale breath with a slight pause after exhale. So an example of that would be if your natural inhale is a like 4 or 5 seconds, you're going to want to progressively exhale for 5, 6, 7, 8 to 10 seconds. You want your exhalation to be double the length of your inhale. So you're giving your body a calming effect. Same thing with that buzzing breath we did. You can do the bumblebee breathing. You also can do something called progressive relaxation. So for some of you, some people, they don't know the difference between relaxation and their regular mode. They actually don't know what relaxation is. So one of the things you can do is use a technique that engages all the muscles one at a time and then relaxes them. So you can start from your feet or from your hands. As you inhale, you're going to make a tight fist. And then as you exhale, you're going to relax it. So you're going to give your body the kind of the feedback it needs to know the difference between you being tensed and relaxed. Don't assume that your nervous system switches back, because we don't know what state you're in right now. So you can go from your head to your toes or down your arms, but you basically squeeze one muscle in your body at a time, as tight as you can squeeze it, and then relax it. So I might do that with sound. I might inhale and then exhale. And I have that long exhale. So I'm trying to get that vagus nerve to switch from the fight and flight response to very busy minded to rest and digest. And one other thing about that is, if you have a lot of things on your mind before you go to sleep, journal, write them out, get them out of your head. Journaling before bed also is very helpful to induce sleep. So double the exhalation, journal, get your thoughts out. If there's things that are important to do, just write them on another list for the morning, get them out of your head in that space, and then work on relaxing your physical body with either tightening and dropping. And the kind of rule of thumb is 12 breaths or more should do the trick for your nervous system.
Great. That's
and
excellent.
also dark
Thanks,
spaces.
oh,
yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
Natalie.
I was going to say, and make sure your space is dark. Dark space. Okay,
awesome.
Go ahead, Ian.
All right. That's going to be the questions. We'll finish off with that. Great questions for today. If anyone does want to reach out to Natalie directly offline, I'm sure she will respond to her emails, and we'll have that information in the package once we finalize it. Natalie, we really want to thank you. We really appreciate the valuable insights you shared with us and the amount of the giving of your time, and thank you on behalf of the community. I would like to thank Roche one more time for their sponsorship of today's virtual community education forum. Natalie, any last thoughts from you?
You are your biggest asset. You are your most valuable asset. If you think that prioritizing other people ahead of you is something positive, if something happens to you, nobody's going to be taken care of. You have to look at yourself. Same thing as if you get on a plane, you put your oxygen mask on first and then you help other people. So imagine these practices as prevention and reversing is like putting on your oxygen mask before you help somebody else.
Great, thanks very much. So just an update for the next community education forum dates. Please join us on our next one on November 14th. An HD Buzz researcher, Dr. Ed Wild and Jeff Carroll. You can register online for these at www.huntingtonsociety.ca/CEF. Details on our February CEF genetic testing with Dr. Claire Gibbons are also posted, and registration is open, so you want to register for that. With that, I would would really like to thank you, Natalie, one last time. All of the participants across the country, thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon. Please share your feedback. We're always open to feedback to make these events better, and opportunities for us to give you what you need. So everyone, thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and we'll talk to you in November. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye-bye, guys.